Thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Emma, and I'm the curator at the San Luis Obispo Museum of Art. I think this is, I would have to count, but I think this is our most well-attended artist talk ever, which is very exciting. Thank you. When I first met Trish, who's our beloved artist who's here tonight, who I will introduce properly in a moment, I went to visit her studio in Savannah in Georgia. For once, the studio visit didn't begin with a studio visit. It began with a walk. Like, she picked me up in her minivan, and we went to lunch, and then we went on this long walk through Savannah in the spring, which is actually apparently the best time to be in Savannah.
Definitely, you don't want to be there right now.
It's like really hot right now.
So hot.
And I remember we had this like 2-hour-long walk, and I had never been there, so I was like really enthralled with all the trees, and I was just in the architecture and the history. And I remember calling a friend that night and saying, like, I'm never doing a studio visit normally again. I'm only going to do this like walking studio visit, because you not only get to know, I had not only got to know Trish as an artist and hear about her practice, but also really got to know her as a person. So I'm very excited. I hope to kind of facilitate our walk through Savannah with you all tonight, if I can. So that's what you're in for. I have to thank our exhibition sponsors first. So Trish's exhibition was presented by Megan's Organic Market, RRM Design Group, Ditty TV, and Shirley and Mike Ritter. So we can
Thank you.
The show is also supported by KSBY Hotel SLO, where Trish and her family are staying this week, and Tricamo Construction. We couldn't do anything we do without the support of fantastic people and organizations like y'all. So thank you so much. Leanne is making me say that admission to the museum is free. This event is free. And there is a QR code in the back if you would like to continue to support our program. It's at the bar. Right there on the bar. This is fun. The exhibition at SLOMA, which opens on Friday, we're not inviting the audience to touch it, but it's going to be very hard for our visitor services staff to manage that for the next 3 months, because Trish's work is so tactile and so tempting to touch. And when I went to Trish's studio after our walk, she cut a piece of her material from a rug on the ground and like cut me a corner and said, I'm going to give this to you. You have to keep it on your desk, and you have to give it a name. And so I named it Elmo, and my colleagues can testify to the fact that, like, when I'm a little bit stressed, I'm just doing some combing. So I thought that you all, since you came to the Artist Talk, should get a chance to also do some combing. So I'm going to pass it around and make sure it gets to the whole room.
I always say I comb my work more than I do my own hair.
Begin the
so
comb.
Relaxing, and I'm always a mess.
All right. And now I will formally introduce Trish. So, accepting commissions worldwide, Trish Andersen creates site-specific installations, fiberworks, and collaborates on product creation for clients such as Coca-Cola, Design Miami, Kimpton Hotels, Google, BlackRock Financial, Shaw Contract, and Ula Johnson, among many others. She lives in Savannah, Georgia, with her husband, artist Michael Porton, who's here
right
in
back
there. Their son, Walter, who we have all gotten to know this week at the museum, 4 cats, and a few thousand balls of yarn, which I think probably, once you see the installation at SLOMA, you'll see that there's actually probably quite a few thousand less balls of yarn now, now that the show is complete.
Yes.
To start our conversation, I thought I would read a quote by a really beloved artist to me. Her name is Ann Hamilton, and she works in installation and some textile work. And I'll read this quote, and then we'll kick off our conversation. And she says, "To work with the hands is to engage in a kind of thinking that is nonverbal and embodied. The hands learn from touch, from resistance, from the texture of materials. This knowledge is carried in the body and is difficult to translate into words. Making is an intimate conversation between the maker and the material, where every movement, every decision shapes not only the object, but the maker's understanding of themselves and their place in the world. The value of the handmade lies not just in the finished piece, but in the time, attention, and care woven into every stitch, knot, and mark. And to start our conversation, I wanted to invite you to introduce yourself and also to talk a little bit about the relationship between your material and you as an artist.
Sure. Hi, I'm Trish Andersen. I'm a fibers and textile artist from Savannah, as you guys have learned. And that's a beautiful quote. I'd say material is a huge part of my work, obviously. It's very material heavy, but and a funny little side note, before I started tufting, I didn't like yarn. So once you see this, you'll be like, what? I didn't like the aesthetics of it. I actually went to school for textiles and fibers, and I wasn't really turned on by yarn then. And I grew up in a carpet town surrounded by yarn. I was like, but something about me starting to tuft, it just opened up that material for me too. And I think a lot of it with material is also the process of gathering it. I'm constant, people always ask me, where do you get it? Where do you do this? And I get it from everywhere. I'm not a yarn snob, you know, and I'm like, it's all about color, texture. I'm just constantly collecting and hoarding. And you heard me today a little bit when we were in the gallery where I can see a color and I'll be like, oh, that was from this project and that's discontinued now. And I drove around Savannah for 3 hours looking for that one, you know, so like it all has a story for me. And throughout my career, material's just been a huge thing. Sometimes it's been paper, sometimes it's been rope, and now it's yarn. So we'll see what's next, but this one's really stuck for a minute.
You talk a little bit, and you know, this is the light in here is not great, but this is an image of Trish's old studio.
Yeah, so I'm actually in between studios right now, and you saw kind of our temporary, my husband and I are building a space behind our house, which is going to be incredible. But this is from my old space, and this is, I don't know, a tenth of the amount of yarn that I had in there. So when I moved to Savannah and I started the studio there, it was in an old house, and I was coming back from living in 14 years in Brooklyn, and my studio was kind of like this, but very cold and very leaky.
I think we have.
And suddenly I was this is in New York, and suddenly I arrived in Savannah, and I'm obsessed with yarn, and I'm a tufter and all the things, and I made this kind of cocoon for myself. So all the walls were covered in yarn, and I just kind of went nuts on tufting down there. But this is actually when I lived in Brooklyn, and my space in Brooklyn.
And you talk about this as your like former career, your
yeah, like my whole other life.
And there's a few images that we'll sort of flip through of Trish's past work and installations. I wonder if you can speak to that old career. You've worked in so many creative industries.
Sure. So I went to school, like I was saying, you know, I grew up in a carpet town. I moved to Savannah to go to Savannah College of Art and Design. And I went for graphic design because I thought naively that the only way to be an artist and make money was to be a graphic designer. And then I quickly learned there's all these other things. And wow, you know, and so I started getting my hands in a bunch of different stuff and interiors and furniture. And I landed on textiles, mainly because it was just like a more open-ended way of thinking. And from school, I moved to New York. I was never someone who wanted to move to New York. I didn't like say, I'm gonna live in the Big Apple or anything like that. I got a job there. And my parents said, you gotta get a job. So I moved to New York to work for Anthropologie, doing windows and displays. I lied about being afraid of heights and all the things, and somehow got some big job on Fifth Avenue. And my first day, I was up on like a 20-foot ladder hanging some chandelier, and I had no clue what I was doing. So it was a lot of saying yes and following opportunity. And also like whatever I was saying yes to, like, oh, wow, I'm getting to still use my hands. I'm still getting to make, right? And I found the art world really intimidating, and I didn't really see my place in it. And I never really tried to be in the art world because to me it was just somewhere that I didn't belong, right? And so it started this sort of whole commercial thing. I don't know if you're going to ask a specific question.
Well, we've talked a little
yeah.
bit about this moment of transition because you were in New York for, I love this picture. You were in New York for 13 years, 14 years.
And I just happened upon the event world because I met like an event producer and she's like, do you want to work in the event world making stuff and designing stuff? I said, are you going to pay me? You know, and she said yes. And my first event was for Bravo. So I got kind of thrown into this world, but it fed my joy of making and I learned how to work big and all these things, but I got really burned out after many years, and that's sort of this shift.
Yeah.
And that picture back there actually was a big shift, and it was a summer that I spent with SCAD in Provence.
Savannah College
in Savannah, yes. And it was the first time I had sat down in probably 10 years, and I actually forgot my password to my computer, which is crazy. And I was like running all these jobs in New York and all this stuff. And that summer was really transformative for me because they commissioned these rope huts. And I was also doing a few other things there. But I really sat still for the first time in forever. And I thought, this is like, I'm missing something. And I need to go back home. And I need to put in the energy to get back to making my own artwork. And this commercial stuff is cool and all, but I don't care about a party. I don't, it's just not where my heart is. And so I left this summer with a promise to myself I'd go back and I would try to get back into my art practice.
And then you started tufting.
Yes. And so while I was trying all kinds of stuff when I got back, and I was messing with paper and messing with this and messing with that, but all of it felt too much like my commercial work. And as I was saying, I'm from Dalton, Georgia, which is the carpet capital of the world. It's still where 80% of the world's carpet is produced.
This is the famous one.
Yeah, and when I left Dalton, I said, I'm never going to have anything to do with carpet. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to see it. I was just one of those people, I didn't want to do what was expected of me, even though there was my world, everything around me was carpet. And all I do is look at the floor when I go places, all these things, but I just bucked it for years and years and years. And then all these things kept happening to me. And so, I'm at this crossroads where I'm like burned out of my career. I'm burned out of New York. And a friend sends me a video of someone hand tufting rugs in India using a single needle a tufting gun. And at that point in time, tufting was not what it is as far as it's common. People were only using it in manufacturing. So you have hand knotted rugs where someone's tying a million knots, or you have a tufted rug or a woven rug, which is woven on a loom. And tufting is essentially you have a backing fabric and then material, yarn is pushed into that. So when I first saw that video, I called my dad straight pissed. Why did you not tell me about this tool? And where can I buy one in downtown Dalton? And he's like, no one uses those anymore. We're mass producing things. No, the only place you can get them is in China and India and blah, blah. And that started this whole research of trying to find the tool and trying to find the information of how to even use it, because it wasn't out there in the way that it's out there now. And some of those before was actually some of my first tufting. So this shows me this was the very first thing I tufted. Of course, I can't start by tufting something this big. I'm like, let's go big, baby. And my husband helped me learn how to use the gun because it showed up just in a box. There was no manual. And I was still in New York and I was dating him and he was in Savannah, and I would fly with my gun to Savannah, and I got it because he's really he's just good. And so I got it wired for his studio in Savannah and my studio in New York. And in between doing my event work and my styling work and all this stuff, I was trying to learn. And
did you have a learning curve?
For sure, because I didn't know how to use it, and I didn't know, and I didn't know what the backing fabric to use, and I didn't know the right yarn to use. And actually that piece is one of my favorite because some of the things that happened, I now like make the gun do, because it doesn't naturally do it unless you're really bad. Yeah, so here you can see me kind of driving it around. This is also in my old studio where I'm in my kind of nest of yarn. These little sacks on the side, I'm actually told myself when I started tufting, I've saved yarn from this installation too, and I'm shipping it home, but I've saved all of the scraps since I first started tufting, and I put them into fruit sacks, and I don't know what I'm gonna do with them, but I'm saving them.
Next show at SLOMA.
Yes, and I call them fruits of my labor. So I said after 10 years, I'll show them. So I'm almost at 10 years of tufting, I think, so pretty soon.
Yeah.
This is a Coca-Cola piece, which was, I was telling her the story. When I started tufting, and then I was already kind of on the move down to Savannah, but I couldn't really go down there all the time because I didn't have a place to work. And then Mike and I ended up getting a house down there that I could set up a studio. And so I decided I was going to set up a studio. I'd keep my stuff in New York because I was scared to put all my eggs in one basket, and I needed to make money, you know. And but I set up the studio in Savannah only to be tufting, and I packed up a box truck with everything that I loved and my favorite things, and all my yarn and all my tufting. And I'm like, I'm going to set it up down in Savannah. And on my way down there, and I'm driving thinking, you are batshit crazy, what are you doing? And I got a call from Coca-Cola, and they needed a Georgia artist to create a piece to launch one of their products called Coca-Cola Georgia Peach. And so I could confidently say, while I was on the side of I-95 in New Jersey, that I was a Georgia artist. And so this was actually the first piece that I did once I moved into that studio.
We've talked a little bit about this carpet moment here.
Oh, yeah, so this was crazy.
Yeah, where it sort of changed your audience, and I'd love for you to speak to that a little bit.
Sure. Me being stubborn about carpets, I'm using rug making tools, of course, and I said, I'm not making rugs. That's not what I'm doing here. You know, we're not making rugs, we're not making carpet, I'm making art here. But we moved into this really cool old house, and we were redoing it, and I thought, well...
Oh, the yellow floors!
Yeah. And I thought, well, I can make a rug for us. And my husband's a painter and sculptor, and I'm a textile person, and so I thought, well, what if I make it look like paint is running down the stairs? And so I made this, with the cheapest of cheap yarn. I didn't even back it properly. We left it at the house because I didn't even let it dry before I attacked, and it's like glued to the floor, basically. Oh. And I installed it, and I had promised, I'm still doing all my other stuff, you know, and this is my joy. And I promised myself I was going to put my work out there more. And so I just snapped this picture like, hey, y'all, look what I made today. And it went completely viral. That was in, I think, 2018 or 2019. And it really changed my life because I had a very, very small audience to something much larger, and it changed the trajectory of my career in which I could start just doing this.
Yeah. You spoke about the sort of intuitive beginnings of this carpet in particular, but in your work in general. And I'm just curious if you can speak to your process, how you begin with that intuition and when it evolves into more sort of formal planning and structure. Trish is like the most organized artist I've ever worked with, by the way. Like this very complex installation at SLOMA is so well executed, and that is really impressive.
Well, thank you. First, I think to myself, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm horrible. I'm just kidding. But you go through all the thoughts. I I remember the first show I had, because I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just doing what feels good, right? And I remember asking my husband at my first gallery show, I was like, well, what do I do? He's like, you do whatever you want to do, you know? So I try to think of that. And someone else also said to me, like, make the things that you want to see in the world. And I do think about that often, because I think, and we were just having this, Sarah and I were about this conversation about how your brain goes, well, can I sell it? Can I do this? Da, 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 da. And it's like, just getting to the core of like what I want to see and what I want to feel. And I also am always trying to surprise myself. And now that I'm working larger scale, a lot of that, I like to be organized, but a lot of it too is because I never saw this space, you know, so I just have to create ways, that I can have people to help me make it, because I work at a scale that I can't physically make in a time that makes sense. And so I develop systems in order to be able to do things so that I can, my voice can be consistent throughout it. And also just because I need to, I'm visualizing it as it goes, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's a dance.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I was struck when I was in Savannah with you by obviously the droopy trees, but also struck by the way that your home life and your professional life are so intertwined. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to the context that you're currently making work in Savannah, at home, with a 19-month-old running around with a husband who's an active artist as well, and how that influences your practice and your approach to your work.
We are tired. We are very tired. No, I mean, I think we've built an incredible life because, and it's not a normal path. There's oftentimes, I think, there's probably an easier way, but it's a meaningful one. And right now I don't have a dedicated studio space, so I'm making this in my living room. And I'm also learning, I'm a new mom, and I was used to, my creative practice was like very regimented. I woke up at the same time, I had my coffee at the same time, I often wore the same clothes every day, even just to like take out any mental decision. That I just like to be in that kind of flow state. Well, a toddler does not allow that. And so that's been one of my struggles of being a new mom, is figuring out like, how can I still have like creative space mentally? How can we provide him a life that he's still integrated in it? And I feel like nearly 2 years in that I'm starting to get more of my footing. But yeah, this installation was like all over our living room, boxes in our kitchen, our cats were sleeping on it. Like, we live and breathe our work, and I wouldn't want it any other way.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a little bit about where you begin, and I'm just sort of flipping through some photos of bigger projects that Trish has done and studio shots. But yeah, I'd love to hear sort of how you begin a project, whether you begin with a color or a pattern or a texture or a sketch, or especially with the tufting process that's so intuitive and free form, how that process unfolds, and how do you make decisions around material and...
I nearly always have a sketch.
She had a full schematic of the museum when I visited.
Yes, that was fun. Make a little mini museum. I'm always sketching and kind of keeping sketches going and all this stuff. The one thing with tufting is it is very similar to painting or drawing, in which you can jump around on your frame, where weaving is very line by line. This I can jump here, jump there, jump there. But you can't necessarily go over an area a bunch, so you have to be pretty decisive. And often I've put things on the frame and I hate it. But then it's a nice challenge to say, well, what can I put next to it that makes me like it? So I like that dance, but I always have a sketch. And then sometimes it's just the material, or like with this show, I was just thinking about the number 100 for whatever, 100 square feet, and how that seems like to me like 10 by 10, like 10 foot by 10 foot, like it seems very small, but how can I fill a space with that? And I was also thinking, I'm about to move and I have a lot of yarn and I need to get rid of a lot of it. So how can I use that?
But she's been kind of sad. She'll be like installing something and like, oh, this yarn, like she was saying, oh, it's out of commission. I can't get it again. And
Yeah.
kind of grieving the yarn.
It just depends. It depends on who. And if I'm doing something for a specific client, it may be that it's inspired by the space. It may be, so I switch it up. But I'm always trying to surprise myself. I like not knowing what it's going to look like until right when I see it.
Tufting has gotten a lot more popular. It's sort of grown in popularity, and more people are exploring the tufting gun. How has that impacted or changed your approach to your work?
It's been very cool to see. When I first started tufting, I'm sure there were people that I just didn't know, but I knew maybe less than 10 people that were using it in their art practice outside of like manufacturing, actual manufacturing. And at that point, the tools weren't even sold in the United States. And so I'm friends with a guy who started tuftinggun.com. And once he started selling that and then teaching or having tutorials, it's been fascinating, absolutely. And it was the perfect storm of the pandemic happening too, and people being stuck in their houses and having fun and wanting to try new things, right? And so it blew up. I'm talking from like 10 to, I think he said he had like hundreds of thousands of customers all over and now there's tufting places all over the world. It didn't so much change my work. I will say that I've worked really hard to change my algorithms to not see it, only because it's just not special to me anymore. I see it all day long. I do think I had a little bit of an advantage not actually knowing how to do it, and so I developed my own techniques and my own way of doing it before all the information was there. But it's been cool, and it's a super supportive community of people. In the early days when we found each other, we're like, thank God, can you tell me how to like do this one button or whatever, and we would share resources and, I think they started selling it at Michael's now. So, we're big time. But it's just a tool, it's a tool, paintbrush, a tool. Like people are going to use it in all different ways, which is special.
You have a pretty well developed and defined brand for one element of your practice. And I'm curious how you protect that and how you protect from people mimicking your brand or how you keep your practice yours.
I don't worry about it. I just can't. I think I have a hard enough time like just staying confident to put myself out there that I can't worry about other people in that way. I feel like there's space for everybody. I don't know, but I don't worry. I don't worry too much about it.
You talked earlier about Coca-Cola, and I think we're approaching here in a minute a pretty big commission. You've had a lot of big commissions in this era of your career.
Sure.
And I'm wondering if you can sort of speak to how those came to be and how you balance that with your other half of your practice.
They come in different ways. It may be that social media or word of mouth or press or I don't know, but thank you for coming. And it's one thing that I think, I talk to people that are young and just starting out and I feel like I'm just starting out too, but like everything that you do adds up, right? And no matter what you're doing. And I felt like I lived in this commercial world for a really long time And I think I could have come out of it and been like, oh, I wasted all that time. I should have been making art all the time, you know? And I actually think that those years really prepared me for where I'm at now. Because I know myself a lot better, so I can like really put that into the art. But it taught me how to think big, how to work big, how to work quickly, how to work professionally, how to manage big budgets, how to manage a team, how to sort, like all the logistics side of like making work. And so I think that that's just helped in a lot of these commission things, the larger stuff. And I also, if you've ever, like working in the event world in New York City, that's so last minute and so insane, anything I do now seems easy.
You sometimes, I think we're approaching a collaborative piece between you and Mike soon. This is collaborative? No.
No, but Mike helps me do a lot.
This project.
Yes.
This is collaborative. You've done a few, I got to see remnants of an exhibition that y'all did together. I'm wondering if you can speak to that collaboration and some of the work y'all do together, and obviously how you are constantly sort of supporting each other's practices.
Well, I think Mike is a way better artist than I am. And he gives me wonderful advice and feedback, and also is an incredible maker and can do all things. This show is the first time that we've actually collaborated on work from its conception. We always, help each other and riff off of things. But this is a show that we did this fall, and it happened to be that it fell on our son's first birthday. And so, which I don't know what we were thinking, agreeing to do a show during that time. But
good birthday party.
Yes, but it was all about our first year of being parents. And so these are some collaborative sculptures that we made. Mike obviously doing the heads, and then we have a raccoon problem at our new house. And so I did the raccoon skin caps. And Mike actually challenged me on this and said he wanted me to make raccoon skin caps and wanted to see how I would make them. And so I didn't tell him how I was going to make them or what they were going to look like until they were done. And you approved, right?
Oh, right.
We made a mini one for our son.
For his birthday.
Yeah.
Let's transition. I think we're approaching photos of the show.
Okay.
And let's talk a little bit about the show, which opens on Friday, called Little by Little. The project feels so process-oriented and also sort of poetic, and has involved a lot of labor and hands, both on your end, preparing the work to be shipped, and then also on the museum's end with all our amazing staff who have worked really hard all week to get everything installed. I would say we're like 91% installed, which is a nice place to be on a Wednesday night when the show opens on Friday. We've got 2 full days. But I'd love for you to speak to sort of how your ideating around this show came to be, and I'll just sort of flip through some images from Trish's studio of the show coming together.
Sure. So I was mentioning that it kind of started with this idea of dots, and I saw them as 1-foot dots. And I'm also trying to activate the floor more. I'm finally not running from carpet, but I'm also, the floor is such a amazing, it's such a huge part of a space, right? And I don't think that it's considered as much. And so I wanted to activate the floor in some way, and then I started on this whole dot thing, and in this idea of like, how can I take something little, but when it adds up, it becomes something bigger. And this whole like little by little has been a mantra in my life recently, just getting things done, or just if I feel sad about the world, and the idea of hope, and just be kind. Little bits of kindness add up, little bits of hope add up. And so it's just been a consistent theme and mantra in my head, and I wanted, this piece to be a reflection of that. And I also am seeing my practice shift a lot away from the tufting frame. Also just because my life is different, and this shows I have like multitasking. I have my son's snacks and the water in his bottle, and I need something now that I can do anywhere. Where tufting is, you have to be on the frame, and it's this whole setup, and like I'm just craving. I've also been doing it for 5+ years, and I always kind of have a shift in those years. So I'm seeing myself shift, and this, like we were going on a trip, I did it in the car, and I did it in,
Birthday party.
Yeah, and I'm also missing, one thing I really loved about working in the event world was just being and working large scale, is I get to work with a lot of people. And I think, being from like 2020 and all that, like I kind of trapped myself in my studio for a while very much like learn why I want to make again and all these things. And I'm really craving myself working with people again. And you have to when it's large, and I just really love that interaction. And so I tricked my friends into helping me, and I had my birthday party, and then when they got there, I said, and we're tying knots. But you're not required, but it is my birthday. But I also did a call out to my community, and I had a lot of people in Savannah that came and helped, and it really... I didn't start it out that way, but it became this kind of beautiful moment of people that, some people I hadn't even met, and getting to know my own community to create this thing. And some people even took them home. And so, they're all made from all kinds of different hands, which is really special, I think.
How many miles of yarn? What are the numbers? What are the stats?
It's nearly 35 miles of yarn.
In the show.
And it's 35,000 knots. And I just have to say that, like, it's painful to knot that much. And then I was doing the research on what an actual hand knotted rug is, and it's like hundreds of thousands of knots. And those people that hand knot rugs can do up to 10,000 knots a day, which to me, I was like, I don't see how a body can physically do it, because I would do, just a couple a night and be really in pain, So it's nothing compared to that. Yeah. This is Mike. In his shop, he has a CNC machine, and knows all the tricks. So this is him cutting you'll see the frames, and painting stacks of them. And it was Mike, like 99 degrees in there? This is yarn. These are the circles getting tufted. This is Walt, our son, and our cat Tater.
I want to ask you sort of in closing, and then we have some time for questions from y'all. I feel like this theme of sort of generosity and accessibility has been emerging for our arts community here in SLO. For me, at the museum, it sort of began with Leah Rosenberg's mural that was so much about engagement with the audience, giving gifts to each other and giving gifts to our community. And even in the last show, Esteban's work and conversation around civic joy and engaging with each other around organizing. And I've been thinking about that sort of as a theme that's been sort of in the museum space and in our community over the past couple of years. And your work is so generous, and it's so considering of the audience and how they'll engage, and it's so intentional about how to bring joy to people, which is so important right now, and the little pieces of hope. And I just wonder if you can speak a little bit to that a little bit more. The generosity, the abundance that's in your work.
I think because for so long I was really intimidated by art and certain spaces that contain art. It's important to me that my work does not give that energy. And also it brings me a lot of joy to make it. So I hope that it shares that with other people. And I want it to be accessible. I want it to be experienced. And I think my materials kind of speak to that too, because this is just like, they're very simple things, right? That we can all go and get, but maybe I reframe them in a more beautiful way that you can hopefully look at simple things in your life and see beauty in them.
And make something with them.
Yeah.
Well, we have like 10, 15 minutes, so if y'all have questions, you can raise your hand. I'll call on you, and then for the camera, I have to repeat the question. So bear with us. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much. This is really inspiring. I love your work.
Thank you.
My question is, I was wondering if you could talk about your relationship to painting, if there is one, and if so, if there are any abstract painters that inspire your work.
Just speak to your relationship with painting. Do I have to repeat?
Yes, I'm horrible with names, but the process is very painterly, and I grew up painting as a kid. I mean, was in painting classes and all this kind of stuff, so I do think it's a subconscious thing, and of course I love paintings, but I'm horrible at names and saying like this person does this for me and all of that, but I would equate tufting to for me, it's closer to painting than any other textile process because of the way you can jump around and the way you can react with color and of course more three-dimensionally. But I think that's why that process really stuck with me, because there was a freedom to it that I couldn't get in other textile processes like knitting, crocheting. I mean, like, I can't even do that stuff. Where there's a lot more movement, a lot more expression. If that answers. And thank you.
Jordan?
Hi, thank you so much for coming and sharing your practice, and thank you, SLOMA and Emma, for curating. I can't help but feel, your work is so visually appealing, but it's also, it's stunning, but it's also very tactile, and it makes me think of Braille. And I wonder if you've ever interacted with someone who's visually impaired or shared your artwork with someone in that set who's hard to see, and if they've been able to interact with it in a more tactile way and experience it as kind of a, touch.
That's very cool. I haven't specifically, but that actually gets my head going, and inspired of how to do something specific to that.
I mean, you've had projects where the audience was invited to
Yeah,
come
so
or
I
engage.
actually had a piece that I did in Atlanta Contemporary that was called Take Care. And so I didn't see it was up for a while. I didn't get to see every, person who interacted with it, but everybody was invited to care for it and comb it. And it was right after lockdown and everything, and sort of thinking about these, like, my own feelings of, like, I don't want to care for that. Like, I don't want to touch it, and how to get back to wanting to touch again. And if it was up to me, I would let everybody touch everything all the time, right? But I enjoy that. I wonder if there's a way I could specifically, I work a lot with CNC tufting as well, which is like essentially like robotic tufting, where I create files and then tell this machine to do what I want it to do. And you can actually input bump map files. I don't know if they look like grayscale, where black represents the longest and white and represents the shortest pile. So I wonder if there's a way I could make like a very specific texture. That I don't know. There's something there. Thank you.
I Sandy.
Hi, thanks a lot for being here. So speaking of touching, I didn't know, and I can really see where, all of us going through and touching, and think a lot of oils and change colors and all sorts of stuff. But I've got these 9 grandkids, and I'm wondering about if, when they come to SLOMA to visit, what are your do you have reservations on any of that?
We're not inviting the audience to touch, but we are well aware that this installation will get touched. Yeah. And
Well, we also tried to think about, you'll see, but they're shorter in the center of the space and they get longer in the, I use that as a parameter to kind of help the way I laid it out as well. I mean, basically, we don't want anyone to get hurt and hang from it and, something. I'm less concerned about the oil and things like, in the mess, as much as I just don't want something bad to happen.
Yeah.
Also, it starts to clump sort of badly.
Yeah.
But there's things on the floor and on the ceiling, so hopefully that helps to create more of a path. There's a path. There's a pretty obvious path that goes through it.
we spent a lot of time in preparation for the show thinking about how people would move through the space and how the space could be used in other ways, because we're a tiny little museum and use our space in lots of different ways. It's one of the Sarahs.
Thank you to both of you. You talked about your community coming in for your birthday and working on one of these pieces with you. Would you ever, since I moved to SLO, I've been here just over a year, there's a huge, just the community here is amazing, especially the art community and people really supporting local and things like that. Would you ever consider doing a larger and more expansive community project, like bringing more people in, involving sort of a large group of people, or expanding throughout the country and bringing in different things, or bringing people in to help you?
Yeah. I think that'd be awesome. I mean, I was thinking it didn't work out with this one, but I was even thinking I could have sent this stuff, to my friend here, my friend there. Like, it could be an interesting, because I make all the decisions before it gets to people that are nodding. So like some of these pictures that maybe one of the slides before this, I can't remember, you can see, I don't know, but this is Abigail, our assistant, who's actually moving to Santa Monica, somewhere in California. And we're gonna miss her. But I make all the blends of the yarn before. So I'm making all these color decisions before. I've already pre-cut everything to the length. So by the time it gets to the knotting stage, you're not thinking, you're just knotting. So I do think that would be really conducive for, not that community can't think, but like it could be conducive to something where I shipped out these boxes all over and people sent them, and there's a tutorial and then people ship them back or whatever it happens to be. I'm open to anything. I think it'd be a fun challenge too.
In the back.
It's kind of hard to hear back there, so I apologize if you've already talked about this. What kind of yarn do you use? Is it wool?
What
All
kind
of the
yarn?
above. Yeah, I use because my work is not functional and, it needs to be a wool rug or whatever it happens to be, all yarn is my friend. So I'm looking at more color, texture, weight, whatever it happens to be, and I say I'm not a yarn snob. Like there's times where I could not get the acid red that I needed in a wool, and I found it at Walmart, and it was amazing. So like I also find that it gives a depth to the work, because of the different dye processes, because of the different textures. Like the cotton, I know always is going to read kind of matte, and then this is going to read kind of this, and so anything and everything I can get my hands on.
Yeah. Any other questions before we wrap up?
So how many people does it take to make like one of your, is it just you and your gun, or do you have like a machine, or do you have other people helping? I kind of missed that part.
It depends on the project, really, and the scale of the project and
Like
time.
a project like, let's see, like that.
That was just two people, myself and my assistant at that point in time, but that's kind of a small thing, right? The larger, super large scale stuff, I'm tufting less in my studio and I'm doing more CNC work. A, because it's actually more interesting to me right now. B, it allows, I have bigger ideas than my body can actually produce. And I am also getting older and I just like physically can't. Like my hands, actually when I had my son, I got really bad carpal tunnel and it was terrifying. Although I think it was the universe telling me, chill out. You can't make all this stuff before this kid comes. So it's a mix. But what would you say, Mike? There was probably like 20 plus people tying knots on this project.
At the museum, yeah.
Yeah, and at the museum, like a ton of people installing, and it takes a lot. Yeah.
Any last questions? Yeah.
I have a question, especially now that you're a mom, your son is young, and I love the image of him climbing in the yarn. Have you thought about the relationship with carpet? I know you had a rough time with that, but now I'm just thinking, possibly him even crawling in that tactile experience of the rug being kind of this domain and this association with home and presence. Have you thought about how that applies to your work in a way, especially now that you're starting to work on the floor more?
Sure. Yeah, of course. And I that's been the most magical thing about tufting too, is like, here's this thing that I bucked my whole life, and like it changed my life, that I actually like listened to what was in me, right? And really in my blood. And so, my parents were in the doormat business, so I can look at this and say, oh, that's not one of theirs. But like I can go anywhere in the world and I can see a carpet or a rug and I think of home, So of course now, and my son is now playing on rugs that I design, and I have ideas of making more interactive rugs in that way. So yeah, carpet is home now, right?
Can you give an example of an interactive rug?
Well, the one that I see is like, a little bit, it's like, where kids play. It's more of a play rug where kids can play with toys or cars or whatever. I want to do kind of my version of that, but like the trees are really crazy, like the puffs that you'll see, like just super dimensional, like very not functional, I'm sure, but like I'm always playing with the pile heights and the styles and the what I can pull off. And I just think it could be this kind of aerial view, perhaps. Maybe that gets a little bit more abstract. I've also would love to pitch to a play space that's all carpeted. So like very dimensional, architectural, whatever it happens to be. Because now that he's like bumping into things and doing whatever, like all I want to do is make soft space.
Any burning questions before we close? I don't see any hands. Thank you, Trish. We're so honored to have you in our community. Thank you so much for all your work, and big applause for our.
Thank you for having me. If anyone needs a roommate, we want to move here. I'm just kidding.
The show opens at the museum on Friday. Please come. It's going to be great. And thank you for coming tonight and listening. See you soon.
Thank you.